Overlord is a small-scale and often forgotten action RPG franchise released between 2007 and 2009. In this shorter retrospective, I'll be looking at the two mainline entries, specifically the single-player campaigns. It's a unique duology that stands out among the many IPs from the late 2000s. Let's get into it. Being the bad guy in video games has always been a tantalizing proposition, whether it's committing crimes in Grand Theft Auto or embracing evil karma in Fallout. When the 7th console generation hit its stride, there were many AA efforts that came and went. One of these was Overlord from the Dutch developer Triumph Studios. Triumph made their debuts in 1999 with their flagship turn-based strategy series, Age of Wonders, which is still going to this day. After releasing Age of Wonders Shadow Magic in 2003, the studio wanted to branch out with some new ideas and partnered up with Codemasters to release the fantasy action RPG. I first tried out Overlord many years ago on the PS3 with the free demo, but this time I'm playing the Raising Hell edition on PC, which came out in 2008. Taking place in a nondescript fantasy world, you play as a Dark Lord broken out of a coffin by his minions, a race of creatures that live to serve. The oldest of their kind, Gnarl, delivers a straightforward tutorial to the player before sending them out to restore the Dark Tower to its former glory and enact your evil rule over the masses. To do so, the Overlord must face 7 corrupted heroes who defeated his predecessor in combat. From the moment you start pushing around your minion Jester, the tone is immediately established. The dark humour and corny voice acting are the product of writer Rhianna Pratchett, who has had a long career in the gaming industry. Overlord plays around with the fantasy environment with many vulgar sights, presenting fluffy, lovable animals as vermin and piling on many modern references. In short, it's Shrek crossed with a heavy dose of Monty Python, and if you're familiar with the latter, you'll latch onto the game's aesthetic quickly. From a third-person viewpoint, you control the titular dark being with a simple 3-hit combo and a set of spells. But underneath your player character there are many microsystems and mechanics, all working away in the background. This is what makes Overlord such an interesting series. It's a unique blend of action role-playing and strategic commands. On PC, the controls are split between using the keyboard for the protagonist and the mouse for his minions. This ended up being more intuitive than console, as on PS3 the right analog stick wasn't always precise enough. On his own, the Overlord has a fair bit of health and can do some damage with his weapons, but he won't get far without his little helpers. The minions are easily the most well-remembered part of the series. Taking the gremlins from the 1984 film and placing them into a fantasy setting builds the central gameplay backbone. You'll start with the Browns, your close-range melee fighters and the toughest of the bunch. Further down the line, the Overlord retrieves the hives of 3 other types. The Reds are your archers, slinging fire at the enemies while being very weak up close. Greens are the stealthy rogues who can deal critical damage with an ambush, and finally the Blues are your mages, who are used mainly for resurrecting fallen minions. Their colour coding also translates to the environments. Reds can absorb fire, greens do the same with poison, and blues are the only ones who can enter water. Each type is summoned from their respective spawning pits using life force, which can be gathered by killing enemies and other NPCs. Your mini-army will need to do a lot of tasks for you over the course of the game. Using the shift key to lock onto your target and click, minions will attack, break and pillage, pick up items, or operate machinery such as door cranks. You can also click both mouse buttons together to assume direct control of the horde, sweeping them around the environment to get to places the Overlord can't reach. Sweeping does lock the camera until you let go of the buttons, and this is where the game starts to run into problems, most notably the camera being clunky when you're not sweeping every minion at once. Having the minions automatically carry key items back to the portals for you is very helpful, but it does result in some delayed returns depending on the distance. When their task is complete, your little helpers have to pathfind their way back to you. Other minor issues also get in the way at times. When carrying items, they can get stuck on parts of the environment for a brief moment, and if you transition into a new area, the object will be reset to its original position and you'll have to pick it up again. Overlord does require some caution at many points, and knowing when to order your minions forward or call them back is often key to victory. Wandering around the levels, which often resemble classic dungeon crawlers, can reveal additional upgrades to your health, mana and minion size, as well as some unique items. But you'll also have to be careful with your minions. The game will teach you the hard way early on that browns can't swim, and send them to an early grave if you order them into water. As long as you have enough life force, you can quickly rebuild your horde, but you'll also have to pillage and upgrade the creatures all over again. Minions are relatively disposable, but you may have to grind up some life force from time to time. When it comes to combat, the long list of enemies possess health bars that go down much more quickly when you combine the minions with your own personal attacks. The overall strength of your horde is measured by a percentage which goes up with a higher minion count and items, then goes down when minions die. When the minions, especially the browns, pillage areas, they also pick up weapons and armour that improve their overall strength. The light strategy elements enter the fray here as well. Many foes have a super attack that can take down many minions in one hit, like a body slam from the trolls. Taking down enemies as quickly as possible before moving on to the next is the best way forward, while also killing the smaller fodder for some free life force. Using a guard marker results in different behaviours for each minion. Browns will guard the area, reds will attack any foes that come in range, greens will go invisible and spring their trap on enemies that get close, and blues will be on standby for medical duties. These markers can also be moved where needed, though it can leave your minions vulnerable if you don't keep an eye on them. Multitasking often plays a role, and in this case Overlord could have used a pause feature from classic RPGs to balance out the proceedings. It's all too easy for a group of weaker minions to get overrun while you're focusing on something else, or the enemies change their main target. This is a bigger problem in the late game, where minions can be annihilated much faster. When you aren't undertaking quests, you'll use portals to travel to and from the Dark Tower. This part of Overlord is quite similar to Fable from Lionhead Studios, your own private lair where you can customise, forge new items, or engage in more private pursuits with one of two mistresses. The Jester minion reads off your achievements throughout the game, and when it comes to crafting you'll need to choose wisely. Steel isn't worth the effort, but Durium and Arcanium items can improve your stats for every 10 minions sacrificed. With both gold and the minions themselves being used in the forge, it will often take a long time to build up your resources again after building an expensive upgrade. This also makes buying new furniture for your tower somewhat redundant. There needed to be an additional benefit to pleasing your mistresses, like a permanent upgrade or secret item. As you make your way through and tick off each quest, you'll quickly find that many of your objectives are rarely so straightforward, often taking you through multiple pathways. Entering the Evernight Forest and conversing with the elves, the player is tasked with taking on a boss, but 6 shields need to be destroyed first, indicated by the corrupted plant roots. This is where the second major flaw is revealed, the lack of a map and objective markers. Overlord asks the player to remember the location of items and also the routes in and out of each area. While each quest is marked when you teleport in and out of the tower, there are no such pointers while playing. This causes some annoying back and forth as you look for the correct way forward. When you combine this with portals and checkpoints being few and far between, this can result in some frustrating moments. For the most part, the levels rely on pathways and breaking through the occasional door. You'll follow these trails for some time, and if the game places some minion spawn pits towards the end of the path, you know you're about to be surprised with an ambush or other encounter. Take this bit at the end of the Mellow Hills Abyss. The mythical stone is in a wider room with extra spawning pits. This is your cue to prepare for a swarm of enemies that you must defend against to retrieve the object and complete the quest. In other cases, Overlord conjures up some more unique scenarios, like baiting enemies into attacking each other, bombing doors to enter a new area, or making use of a specific minion to draw out attacks. Raising Hell also plays around with the scenarios with a lot more puzzle solving. It takes the main foes you defeated in the campaign and subjects them to various levels of torment. Take Melvin Underbelly, a fat halfling corrupted by his gluttonous appetite. In his section you have to feed him so much food that he explodes and clears the path to a crank. Then, in a homage to Breakout, you'll use your minions to bounce Melvin around and hit all the targets like a bowling ball. These moments of inventive design stand out from the rest of the game. At other points they do walk a fine line between challenge and cheapness. The second round of the Abyss, which sees the Overlord pander to a group of domineering women who demand your cleaning duties, is capped off by a heavy metal skeleton king who blocks your way to the exit. Even after the boss is defeated, the game also throws a never-ending legion of skeletons at you, You'll need to take most of the aggro yourself, or sweep the minions around the enemies to reach the portal. On your way through the title, the wacky satirical art style will make an impression, though you shouldn't expect high production values on a lower budget. Overlord's graphics aren't very detailed, and some of the audio sampling for the voice lines is pretty crap, though this may be intentional given the game's humorous tone. Luckily, the soundtrack is able to pick up the slack, with a distinctive main theme and a range of tracks to populate your exploits. The most memorable is the minion theme, which is a great fit for your band of mini soldiers. As the Overlord's influence grows, several major milestones are reached. You'll take out Sir William the Black and his succubus queen, which results in 2 different boss fights, before searching for Velvet, sister of the Overlord's current mistress. As I was leaning more into the destruction choices for my playthrough, the more sultry mistress was chosen. It's good that the game offers some variation for players who choose to be evil or really evil. The issue is how many of the key actions you'll take aren't presented clearly. Corruption is shown as a percentage, but you can end up accidentally taking the wrong choice as a result. When you reach the end of a realm, it's obvious that you'll need to choose between gaining servants or slaughtering them for your own gain. But other objectives like killing 100 humans or elves will end up going right over your head. Many quests flow into each other, and when you complete one, especially after defeating a boss, you can be assured that a new Abyss region will open up, or a new area will become available. After defeating Oberon in the Evernight Forest, you'll transition to the Golden Hills, home to the dwarves. You shouldn't underestimate these pint-sized soldiers, especially when they're hopped up on booze. The final realm is the Ruborian Deserts, which is certainly the most perilous, as you avoid giant sandworms that can only be killed by luring exploding bugs. At the end of this sequence, you'll capture an elusive thief to lure out her lover, a towering knight named Khan. This is where the difficulty really ramps up, and it boils down to 2 things: these red mercenaries and the ensuing boss fight. The mercenaries are a massive pain in the arse. If they manage to chuck a firebomb into a crowd of minions, they'll take most of them out instantly. Khan is also a tough foe, able to take half of your health in a single swing. Be prepared to burn through many minions in these final levels. After cutting the armoured giant down to size, it's straight back to the tower for the last set of quests. An unnamed wizard suddenly reveals himself as a master manipulator who corrupted all the heroes you've killed throughout the adventure. His last stroke is to seize control of the Overlord's tower and turn the minions against the player in a 2-part battle. The first is a straightforward task of reclaiming the hives while taking out the brainwashed minions, and the second is a final encounter in an arena where you have to use the right colour to take down his shield. It's a very simple conclusion, but those who bought the expanded edition were treated to one more encounter. Raising Hell serves up the true ending. Once you've taken down the wizard, the 5th and final sequence will open, the Infernal Abyss. Things start off a bit grindy as you take on a gargantuan horde of wraiths. After making your way through a labyrinth, the final boss is the Forgotten God. He's a formidable opponent who will make absolute mincemeat of your minions, so make sure you have plenty of life force built up beforehand. The way to take the giant down is to trick him into smashing the walls, allowing you to deal higher damage. Once defeated, the Overlord is declared the ruler of the Infernal Abyss, but in a last-minute swerve, the protagonist is left stranded in the realm with no way to return to the Dark Tower. It's an odd place to leave things for a sequel, but as Niall puts it, evil always finds a way. Your chosen mistress is pregnant with a new Overlord, which sets the stage for the second and final entry in the series. Overlord received mostly positive reviews on release, and sold well enough for Triumph to consider a follow-up. They got started on the sequel immediately after Raising Hell. Overlord had developed a reasonable fanbase, which prompted Triumph to take the series a step further in 2009. In addition to the main follow-up, we also had 2 spin-off games on Nintendo consoles, Dark Legend for the Wii and Minions for the DS. Neither of these were developed by Triumph and garnered mostly mixed reviews, preventing the IP from growing. Overlord II arrived in June, avoiding a third and fourth quarter dominated by the AAA market. Having already played the free demo, I decided to jump into the PS3 version back when it first came out. The sequel may not break out of its AA route, but it successfully expands and adds to the base formula. It's been years since I last played it, though on PC the additional Battle Rock content pack was not included. Picking up where Raising Hell left off, the Overlord's son is found in the winter town of Nordberg. He's picked on by the local children, and the minions test him in a seamless tutorial. Overlord 2 differs from the first game by weaving in the greater narrative. We see the town of Nordberg celebrating Midwinter's Eve, get introduced to the Overlord's close friend Kelder, and witness the invasion of the glorious Empire. Right away, Overlord 2 ups the narrative scale from its predecessor, while also building more connections between factions and locations. Of course, the Empire is heavily inspired by ancient Rome, and as the young Overlord escapes their army with the help of a young Yeti, he is frozen in the ice and later discovered by Gnarl. When you first start playing, you'll see that Triumph took quite a few notes when it came to the wider structure and design. The addition of a map screen in the bottom left corner is a great improvement, with new pathways gradually being filled in alongside objective markers. Thanks to Giblet, the digger minion, portals to and from your dark domain are clearly marked, and can also be used to teleport around the world portals rather than having to slowly trek through each environment. This results in a more narrow and direct campaign structure. Rather than having to cross in and out of different areas as you did in the original, Overlord 2 is always pushing you forward on the main quests, with side tangents popping up from time to time, like putting down the occasional rebellion. You will also return to areas to pick up rare resources or open up new pathways. For core gameplay, things are somewhere in the middle. The most noteworthy change is to sweeping, which now controls the camera as minions are moved around the environment more quickly. In theory, this would have solved the jagged edges of the first game's camera, but the updated system is imprecise at many points. Often when I started to sweep minions, the camera would whip around 180 degrees, or have trouble following the right group of minions when a couple were separated from the pack. These unwieldy results are especially frustrating when taking on tougher fights later in the game. Take the Gargantuan, a lumbering brute who charges at your horde. It can be fiddly to get your minions out of the way in time, or get the right angle for a sneak attack from the greens. On that note, every minion behaves just as they did in the original, with the reds, greens and blues being acquired in a similar fashion. The big additions are mounted creatures and new enemy types. Browns can ride wolves, giving them an attack boost and the ability to jump across gaps. Greens get the spiders, which can climb walls and leap on enemies for extra damage, and the reds tame salamanders, allowing them to move, flank enemies, and hurl flames at the same time. On top of all that, the Overlord is now able to possess his minions, taking control of them to open doors, use a disguise or two, and head through otherwise inaccessible areas. In combat, most of your foes will go down with enough attacks, though several now respawn infinitely until you take out their spawn points, like a tent or forest canopy. It's the Empire that offers a new twist. The base foot soldiers can congregate into singular formations which require more planning to defeat. You could take out their commanding officer first, flank them to prevent reinforcements, or charge in to break their morale. At times you will have to brute force your way through, or retreat from a charge, but the level of strategy remains intact. The Neverwell Tower has also seen some changes. It's bigger and more visually appealing thanks to floating platforms and a more hellish backdrop. The key addition is magic modification up in the private quarters. By finding catalysts out in the game world, you can upgrade your spells to be more damaging if you're playing destruction, or more potent if you're going for domination. Your choices influence the direction your spells will go. In my playthrough, the Halo spell provided stronger buffs to my minions, rather than a more deadly shockwave. Minion resurrection, however, isn't really worth the effort. It's not like XCOM where you can create and grow attached to your soldiers. Because life force is fairly plentiful and minions remain so disposable, it's better to save your resources for more useful items in the Forge, which has also seen some improvements. Upgrading your minion strength is now possible with 5 levels for each type, while also requiring the new Dark Crystals. Weapon and armor customization returns, though once again it's best to save your items for better gear further down the line, like the Infernal Commander, a helmet that upgrades your minion horde size. This time around, the Overlord has 3 mistresses who are all more developed than Rose and Velvet. Kelder is the Overlord's childhood friend and a capable hunter. Juno is a voluptuous member of the Empire elite and clearly Gnarl's favourite. Queen Faye is somewhere in the middle, an unexpected addition who can be killed and turned into a ghost form if you're going for destruction. Once again, all can be charmed with tower furniture, with a secret foursome cutscene if you manage to impress all three. The first act of the game involves an introduction to various characters and mechanics, while returning to Nordberg for a slice of revenge. Early on, we're introduced to Florian Greenheart and his valiant soldiers of the Sanctuary. Once again, the corny voice acting is on full display, with the elven warriors leaning into a hippie style. They're out to protect the fluffy ones and stand up to the man, taking the Yeti away on their ships in the early going. Life Force is given out like candy for most of the game, especially for the browns and reds. The endless slaughter of the gnomes will be a potent source, with one minor quest tasking you with killing 1,000 of the tiny burrowers. After conquering Nordberg, what to do with the 100 villagers enters your agenda. Enslaving them will yield minion weapons, extra life force from breeding the local wildlife, and a surplus of gold every time you return to the area. Kill them outright, and you get a quick boost in your fortunes, but lose out on additional upgrades and resources. This is a great way to build on the strengths of the original, while enhancing the choice between domination and destruction, though it does involve a bit of grinding by breaking open house doors and surrounding fleeing citizens. You'll need to be careful. If you accidentally kill a villager by holding down the magic button too long, the only way to reverse the mistake is to quit and reload your save file. Once again, the lack of a manual save feature does become a problem. Generally, it's best to use caution when tackling specific quests to make sure you don't trigger the wrong outcome by mistake. Further down the line, you'll return to Nordberg with the greens and blues to sort out the remaining villagers, but be prepared to scour high and low. With no objective markers, trying to find the last stragglers can be a time-consuming process, especially if you're a completionist. Generally, this problem can be solved by exiting and returning to your settlements. Pressing on, the snowy tundra gives way to something more exotic. This is another way the game expands dramatically from its predecessor. Rather than feeling confined to a set of connected realms, you feel like you're embarking on a bigger quest. After deciding between enslaving 10 more villagers to clear the way, or take the easy way out by torching a 4th fire pit, you'll sail out of Nordhaven and head for Everlight. Sailing the ship is very straightforward. With 10 browns at the helm and the reds on deck, you'll head through a gate by returning 4 keys to their plimps, seizing a more sturdy vessel along the way. With a wider range of environments and some more detailed graphics, Overlord II feels much larger and more grandiose than the original. It still maintains the same raunchy humour, with many humorous moments in the script. The soundtrack is the biggest highlight, with some strong action cues and a brilliant main theme that really amps up the quest when you take on the Imperial armies. When you're done with sailing, minion possession reaches its peak with the greens and a major stealth incursion. When the green hive is stolen by the Empire, you'll take control of the stealthy ones, launching sneak attacks on these mechanical troops and avoiding the watchful eye of the sentinels. It's a solid change of pace, though it will take longer with repeated mistakes. If you lose the green minion, you'll get kicked back to the possession stone and will need to run through the castle all over again. Triumph could have made some possession sequences for the reds and blues, but what we get is still enjoyable. The lush jungle environment also makes an impression. Between battling bloodthirsty giant pandas and killing a spider queen, the Overlord will have a lot on his plate after being marooned. Tracking down the browns who are webbed up by the spiders, then using said insects to ascend out of a temple, brings more variety to the proceedings. Using mounts to create some standalone sequences makes Overlord 2 stand out more than the first game. Eventually you'll make it to Everlight itself, a parody of short-haul holidays like Benidorm, with many bloated, sunburnt Imperial citizens living their lives of excess. Smashing your way through the luxury goods and dealing with the Baroness, this tropical paradise marks your second big choice between domination and destruction, with another set of civilians. Thanks to the more direct focus, there's a solid sense of build-up as well. First you took down the Empire's outpost, then you captured their holiday resort, and now you enter their primary domain via the harbour. The gradual increase in enemy power isn't without issue. This is where cheap deaths start to enter the scene. The enemy catapults are lethal, killing both the Overlord and his minions in one hit, and enemies like the Legionnaires can be very dangerous and aggressive. This is especially true when you enter the slums and sewers to break the blues out of captivity. With no way to challenge the enemies on your own, this section is entirely dependent on cautious movement, though crafting a stronger weapon can definitely help. Shortly thereafter, the Overlord is captured by the Sentinels while attempting to claim the Blue Hive. This leads into the arena, a big highlight of the title. This challenging multi-round showdown features multiple foes, from helpless slaves through to unicorns and a gargantuan. Early on, you're pushed to use the Blue's revive ability, while freeing other minions to help in the fight. It's all capped off by the return of the Yeti, who lobs exploding barrels at you. Having already destroyed doors and other obstacles, you already know the way forward. Unfortunately, the end of the set piece is rather sloppy. After you make your way up to the crowds and smash the central pillars, Emperor Solarius will flee, throwing the arena into chaos. The problem is how the game throws dangerous legionaries at you when dealing with the Yeti and finally obtaining the Blue Hive. If most of your minions have died, you may end up succumbing yourself and have to replay the exploding barrel section all over again. On top of that, the huge gold bonus will quickly fade away if you don't grab it quickly. It's these little niggling things that keep Overlord from reaching its full potential. Now that the blues have been acquired, it's back to the ruins of the old tower to retrieve the remaining 11 shards of the Tower Heart. Florian Greenheart begrudgingly joins you at the behest of Queen Faye, who is losing her own battle against the Empire. One thing you notice on replaying is how Florian can run across the miasma without taking damage. This innocuous detail hints at his true identity. Eventually the Empire springs an ambush, with the elf being dragged off to the arena and the Overlord forced to flee to the last sanctuary. This is where you'll drain Queen Faye's energy to charge up the Tower Heart, though first you'll have to take down the Salamander King in the depths. It's another good sequence, though you may find the Tower Heart getting stuck as you make your way to the last area. With the destruction of the last sanctuary and Dark Fae as your third mistress, it's almost time for the finale, though first it's back to Everlight to put down a rebellion. The elves bombard you relentlessly with poison and bombs, but this final side quest does stick out for its frustrations in the domination playstyle. Some of the Everlight citizens are taking part in the rebellion, being marked as enemies while also being a part of the 100 total. You have to be extremely careful in the second half of the mission. First, the Reds have to be placed well away from the action, as they'll quickly kill the citizens. Then, you have to carefully maneuver bombs to avoid blowing them up by mistake. And finally, you must use the spiders to subdue the stragglers on the platforms. If you accidentally kill anyone, then your 100% domination run is forfeit, and you'll need to start the quest again, which I had to do at least 3 times. This is the biggest case of balance being tipped wildly off center, making for a much easier time if you're going for destruction. With the imminent assault on the Imperial City, you have a choice to make between your mistresses, but it ends up being a bit of a no-brainer. Kelda delivers the support of the walls, which at least for me were the best mounts by far, able to break the Empire formations. Juno and Faye offer the spiders and salamanders respectively, but the use of both is too situational as the game enters its climax. The level has some narrow passages on the way to the city walls, and there is little room for spiders and salamanders to make flanking maneuvers. What we get is a large-scale battle in which you take the Tower Heart to 3 hills, using catapults to smash the enemy forces while making your way to the city walls and annihilating any reinforcements. Launching the Tower Heart to take down the shield marks the end of the first stage. Inside the city, you'll need to take out 4 temples that power another shield for the inner palace. It's here we receive the last few morsels of the story. The Empire being revealed as a hypocritical group driven only by a lust for magical power works well, but the reveal of a mysterious woman as the Overlord's mother does not. Rose needed to make more appearances throughout the title, but her role in the story is very shallow, and she interrupts the final battle with a short cutscene. When you finally get inside the palace, Florian Greenheart is revealed to be Solarius himself, which is all part of the joke of course. Hearing such a goofy voice placed on a formidable Augustus-like figure, he dives into the vat of pure magic and takes the player to a final boss, the Great Devourer. To succeed, your greens and reds will need to target the blue pustules on his body, while your browns and blues are on standby to take on other enemies and clear the magic goo. Beware, as the second stage features some deadly archers, and the final stage of the fight will take much longer if you haven't upgraded your target spell towards destruction. With Solarius killed and the Empire defeated, Overlord 2 offers 3 endings depending on your choices: 100% destruction, 100% domination, or a combination of the two. You can also keep playing after the conclusion to wrap up any loose ends or upgrade your items. The Overlord is on top once again, though Null remains wary of other forces that could one day challenge the Dark Lord. Overall, this sequel remains the best of the two games for me, even if some gameplay issues remain unfixed. Any fans hoping for Overlord 3 were left disappointed. Triumph Studios left the series behind and returned to Age of Wonders. The developer was eventually acquired by Paradox Interactive in 2017 and haven't strayed far from regular strategy titles. Codemasters did try to resurrect Overlord with Fellowship of Evil in 2015, but it was widely panned across the board, having completely abandoned the gameplay and design templates that made the duology so unique. Overlord now stands as a forgotten property, one that faded away as we entered the 2010s. The closest equivalent now is Nintendo's Pikmin series. It's very unlikely that Triumph will bring the franchise back, but for those who did get into the two games, the genre blending worked well enough, and is something we rarely see in modern gaming. Nowadays, it's often up to indie studios to make innovations and take creative risks on lower budgets, but every so often you'll find a new series that stands out from the crowd. Thanks for watching.